My name is Tommy Winfrey, and I am the Workforce Development Liaison at the Office of Youth and Community Restoration. The purpose of the OYCR Youth Justice Action webinar series is to provide all juvenile justice stakeholders with information on practices and trends that highlight the shifting landscape of the juvenile justice field to improve outcomes for children, families, youth, and communities. OYCR was born out of Senate Bill 823. Our vision is to our vision is to envision a healthy California that enables all youth to be responsible, thriving, and engaged members of their community. Our mission is to promote trauma-responsive, culturally informed, gender-honoring, and positive youth justice for all youth involved in the juvenile justice system and to support our youth's successful transition and welcome into adulthood and into their communities. Later, you will hear more from both me and my colleague, Dr. Michael Massa. I will discuss the partnership between OYCR and the Department of Rehabilitation, while Dr. Massa will highlight the foundational role of education in workforce development. But first, it is my great pleasure to introduce you to our guest speakers for today from California's Department of Rehabilitation. Elizabeth Musgrove serves as the Chief of DOR's statewide Student Services section. She specializes in forming and sustaining strategic alliances with systems that support youth. She is deeply committed to advancing DOR's mission of using employment as a pathway to equality and active community participation. We also have Christina Canavari. She is the manager of DOR's Student Services section. She is passionate about engaging with youth with disabilities and their support networks, emphasizing the importance of early conversions about employment expectations. She also works to collaborate with community partners and to ensure youth have access to services that empower them to achieve independence and build meaningful careers. So join me in welcoming both Elizabeth and Christina.
All right, good morning, everybody. And thank you, Tara. Thank you, Tommy, for that great introduction. It's good to see everyone joining us here today. And it's really special that we're here together to talk about services that we're able to provide. So we would also like to thank everyone at the Office of Youth and Community Restoration, OYCR. And again, everyone who's here to be a part of this webinar. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really honored to have the opportunity to work with you all and with the youth who you work with, and really are preparing to be those cycle breakers, to have the opportunity to live and thrive in their communities. I want to pause really quickly because I've been trying to fight this cough, so I apologize ahead of time. I should have said that in the beginning. Please bear with me. I'd also like to start off by sharing what our mission and our vision is, and it's here on this slide. And you will hear from the Department of Rehabilitation. You'll also hear us refer to the department as DOR because we love our acronyms. So just wanted to share that with you as well. So reading from this slide, our vision is employment, independence, and equality for all Californians with disabilities. And our mission is California Department of Rehabilitation works in partnerships with consumers and other stakeholders to provide services and advocacy, resulting in employment, independent living, and equality for individuals with disabilities. Now, DOR we play a critical role in supporting people with disabilities and achieving their employment and independent living goals. Our mission is not just about providing resources, but it's about creating opportunities. And as I said before, those cycle breakers and breaking down those barriers so that everyone can participate fully in their communities and in the workforce. These are our future workforce that we're working with, and our current workforce. We offer vocational rehabilitation services, which helps individuals with disabilities prepare for, find, and retain meaningful employment, whether it's through job training, resume building, or assisting with accommodations in the workplace. The department works closely with both job seekers and employers to ensure that individuals can thrive in the workforce. For many, this isn't just about securing a paycheck. It's about gaining independence and really self-sufficiency, which are incredibly empowering and really needed, and what we all want and need to thrive in our communities. We strive to advocate for systemic change to improve accessibility and inclusivity in every part of our society. We work alongside local communities, employers, we work with schools and other organizations such as the Office of Youth and Community Restoration, who I will go ahead and say OYCR, to promote disability awareness and eliminate the barriers that too often limit opportunities for people with disabilities. We're an essential resource in providing individuals with the support, skills, and opportunities they need to succeed both in the workplace and in everyday life, whether through career guidance, independent living assistance, or broader advocacy efforts. Our goal is to help create a more inclusive and accessible California for all. So let me talk about our core values, which is on this slide. Our core values also follow our mission of employment, independence, and equity, but it explains it a little bit more in this slide. It reads, DOR celebrates that every individual is unique, talented, and has potential to contribute to their community. DOR strives to equip individuals with the tools to prepare for and attain employment, achieve independence, and realize equality. DOR embraces the pursuit of high demand, high quality, and high wage jobs that are meaningful and satisfying to the individual. And lastly, early discussions about career is a pathway to long-term employment success. And this is a great opportunity for me to speak on supporting each participant as an individual. We tailor every service to that employment goal, having discussions that are participants that embrace a person-centered approach, an approach that provides support or services that focuses on the individual's unique needs, preferences, and goals. Rather than applying a one-size-fits-all method, this approach tailors discussions or services to their specific circumstances and employment goals. It's about putting the person at the center of decision-making and ensuring that their voice is heard in every step of the process. I want you to think of DOR as a continuum of services, which can start at age 16 years old. But remember, our services are tailored, and a student can achieve the full range of services depending on their path to reach their employment goal. Chris will talk a little bit about that later in our presentation. Excuse me. Right now, I would like to talk about that last portion of this slide, which states, early discussions about careers are a pathway to long-term employment success. It's where student services have an opportunity to start planting those employment seeds. So think about that impact of that, those employment seeds, and thinking what they're going to do for their future. So let's talk about student services and what that looks like in our continuation of services. This next slide reads a snapshot of DOR's student services. Okay. And it says, DOR is committed to empowering students with disabilities to explore, plan, and prepare for the ever-changing world of work. If we think about that ever-changing world of work, think about things like artificial intelligence, things like what we are gaining, social media, and then also think about vocational work and opportunities that are available. And again, I go back to, it's an individualized opportunity for these individuals to work. Maybe for one, it makes sense to go into a field of engineering, and the other person wants to be a diesel mechanic. So it's really important that we tailor these services to what those individuals are. The next paragraph says, DOR services are individualized, customized, and tailored to meet the needs of each student, including exploring career interests, strengthening communication skills for the workplace, learning how to search and apply for jobs, building independent living skills, participating in informational interviews, job site visits, job shadowing, and creating a plan for a career that matches their interests, strengths, and life goals. This is some of the services that we're able to provide, but it's really a small list of what can be provided to our participants. So what are these services? This slide says who is eligible for DOR student services. And on the right here, it says a student is ages 16 through 21. A student has a disability enrolled in school or a recognized academic program, including if on break or if school hasn't started yet. So let's say if a student is graduated from high school and they have applied for a community college or a vocational program, that person will be somebody who's enrolled in school and would qualify under Department of Rehabilitation student services. So it could look different for everybody. And then at least one of these options is true. The student has an IEP or an individualized educational program, has a 504 plan, or has a disability. So the IEP and the 504 are pretty straightforward. You get those from our educational partners, right? But has a disability. Now that can be pretty broad. The best advice I can give is to refer the student to the Department of Rehabilitation, and we will be able to work with the student or the partner to determine if they are eligible for services, because there can be many. And remember, there is no cookie cutter and one size fits all. A student can have a specific learning disability, traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress disorder, depression. They can be visually blind or deaf or hard of hearing. And honestly, the list goes on and on. But again, the best advice is to refer them to the Department of Rehabilitation, and we would be able to contact them for further discussion. So if we can go to the next slide and talk about what are these services? We've been talking about the services to students. The services to students are listed here: job exploration, counseling, work-based learning experiences, post-secondary counseling, work readiness training, self-advocacy training. And so I'd like to take, if we could stay on this slide, and I'd like to just have a real quick discussion on what that might look like for each of those services. The job exploration counseling is counseling that allows students to learn about the different kinds of jobs and which ones are best for their strengths and interests. So students can learn about jobs and labor market information, career pathways in their local area, in-demand jobs, and understanding what they need to get the career they want. Sometimes when I work with students, it's kind of like they want a job that maybe has some steps involved. So what are those steps, and what would they look like? Is it going to get a certificate? Is it getting an associate's degree? Is it going for vocational training? So these are some of the discussions that we would have with some of these with the students. The next one is work-based learning experiences. And this is a variety of ways that students to connect with local professionals and get real-world work experience. It could include opportunities for internships, apprenticeships. It can include volunteer opportunities. It can include a student paid work experience. And specific to working with individuals and facilities, we're trying to really think outside the box, right? To give students and youth opportunities to experience a work experience in the facility. And so we're looking at different options and ways that we can provide this service for many different individuals and their circumstances. We also have post-secondary education counseling, and this helps students learn about different educational programs and resources to support their educational success. It can include college application and admissions process. We discuss career options. We can assist with free application for federal and student aid. And these are some of just the examples that can fall under some of these five core services. It can be broad. It can be based on what the individual is interested in and what their career goal would be. We also have self-advocacy skills. And this one allows the students to build their leadership skills, to gain confidence in their professional environments and understand what they need to succeed in the workplace. Some of these skills and services can be including rights and responsibilities. You can talk about requesting an accommodation at school or work, preparing leadership activities offered in community or educational settings, self-advocacy skills for identifying what those services and what they would need in an educational program. So we talk about what that might look like for them. You know, when students are in school and they have their IEP, like I shared earlier, or 504, and they have their support group. That support can continue as they transition into whatever their next step would be. Vocational training, community college, so something along those lines, continue to complete high school. And then the last one is workplace readiness training. And that one is really prepares students for employment by learning those good work habits, by strengthening those interpersonal skills, and developing those independent living skills. Some call it maybe their soft skills, right? Working with employers, coworkers, that transition and how that might look like. So it would be more of job seeking, like having job clubs, workshops. We have provided college or site tours, building an effective resume, having a cover letter, job application, interview guidance, like mock interviews, inappropriate job seeking, grooming and clothing. And so we also have soft skills workshops. And then we also have, we're able to provide a benefits planner, a work incentives planner that would be able to work with individuals who receive Social Security benefits. So those are the five, and they look different for everybody. Like I said, I think one of the ones that was really important for me when I work with individuals is financial literacy, right? Because they have not worked in a while, maybe, or maybe they weren't able to save their money, or what that means to where to put their money. And so I think it's important to have somebody work with them to talk about what that might look like, how that might affect your future, and what you would do with that information, and now having money coming in. And so I think those are some of the ones that we are really excited about to provide. I also wanted to share where these services can be done. So these services can be done in the facility. We have come into some of the facilities. It can be provided at the school. It can be provided in our office at maybe a partner site. But really the goal is to meet the student where they are, to be fully engaged with the student, and to have an opportunity to establish a good rapport, to listen, to understand as they go through their journeys. So, and then if we can go to the next slide, this slide is partnerships are important to DOR's connection with students. This might sound cliche, but I think when we think of having our community, you know, and being part of the community that's together to uplift and help these students, and what that would look like. So it's not just probation, it's not just DOR, it's not just OYCR, but it's really a connection of our relationships that are able to allow our students and our individuals and our participants to truly thrive, so that we are able to come together to provide services. So it's seamless, right? There's no questions. It's having discussions, following up, asking what's going on, or is there any other support or services that we're able and can provide. So these are some of the partnerships that we have. We have the regional centers. We work closely with our local education agencies, our foster care systems, and you all know this, right? There's a lot of overlap, and you can kind of see this picture in the picture here. There's a lot of overlap and a lot of interconnectedness between our programs, behavioral health systems, youth justice systems, and of course, parent groups, and allowing them to be a part of that, or their natural supports, or what supports look like for them. So those are some of the partnerships that we are in discussion with, continuing to create strong relationships with, so that our participants are able to continue to thrive. At this slide, I'll go ahead and tap in Chris. There you go.
All right. Thank you, Elizabeth. Good afternoon, everyone. As Elizabeth was chatting, I was looking through the chat, and I love that there are representatives from all over the state, from the north, south, and central portions of the state. So thank you very much for joining us. As Elizabeth was talking about DOR, and I'll reiterate, our whole focus is working in partnership with individuals and other community-based organizations, county public systems, to provide services and advocacy that is resulting in employment, independent living, and equality for Californians with disabilities. And Elizabeth has been talking about, I kind of like to think about that we have two very distinct focus. So as Elizabeth was talking about our focus on students, those who are ages 16 through 21, just before their 22nd birthday, who are an active student enrolled in a recognized educational organization. That's one area of where our focus is. Our other focus is with Californians with disabilities of all ages who are looking for entering the employment world, are looking to advance in their employment, who are needing assistance in maintaining their employment. So really thinking about not only students, but we're working with individuals of all ages. And it's not uncommon for DOR to work with individuals who might be in their 60s or in their 70s and are remaining wanting to be active in the employment arena. Again, focused on employment, independent living, and equality and involvement with their community. So Elizabeth reviewed the entrance criteria for individuals to come into DOR for services that are student focused. But our other arena is our general, what we call our vocational rehabilitation services for anyone of any age, including students. And the whole focus on this side of our, dare I say, house, on this side of our house, we're focused on providing services to an individual who has a physical or mental impairment that has impacted their ability to prepare for, to obtain, to retain, or regain employment. That's our whole entrance criteria. And specifically for those individuals who are ready to benefit from DOR services and they're seeking an employment outcome within the community, and in our parlance, integrated setting. So thinking about what DOR does, and it's such a great privilege to be able to interact with students, to help them think about their future, to begin planning, to begin exploring their career. But we're doing that same, and we offer that same sort of service to those that are over age 22 or those who are younger but may no longer be a student. So let's go ahead and move to the next slide. So often we receive questions about what happens, what is the process, what is the timeline. So let's talk about that a little bit. So individuals who are still students, they're enrolled, perhaps they're working with county probation and the county office of education. That referral to DOR is very quick. We're focusing services in those 5 areas that Elizabeth talked about earlier, but we also have the opportunity to continue on with youth, with young adults, with adults, and focus towards their career goal and provide services and resources that are focused on their career goal. And that first step in coming to the department is our application eligibility step. What does an application look like for DOR? There's lots of choices. An individual may visit the DOR website. On our landing page, there is a big giant button that says Getting Started. An individual may click on that, provide contact information to have Department of Rehabilitation get in touch with them, phone number, email address. That's one option for connecting with the department. A second option is to locate one of the DOR offices that are throughout the state. We have 80 branch offices. There is at least one office in every county. Large counties with large geographic areas or large population, we have multiple offices. And those offices, with Google these days, it's really easy to click in Department of Rehabilitation, Stockton, California, and up will pop that branch office for that location. Also on our website, there is a Find the Office option, and I'll put that link in the chat so that you can all find that. So individuals might visit the local Department of Rehabilitation office and request to get started with DOR. That's one way to submit an application. Another way is to call that local DOR office and to say, I'm interested in services and I'd like to arrange a time to get started. So lots of options. That that website portal to fill out that brief document, phoning or visiting, and certainly all of you with your connection, you're also able to make that same phone call to our office and request for an individual to get started. So after we've received that application, that next step is really determining eligibility. And what that means is we're looking for information to verify that the individual has a disability, a physical or mental impediment that has impacted their ability to get, keep, or retain employment. And so we have to go through that eligibility determination step first. After that business stuff gets completed, then that's where the fun begins with our services. And that's the developing a vocational plan, identifying an individual's vocational goal. what is their career goal, and the steps, the resources, the services that are needed to achieve that goal. And I always think about this phase in working with Department of Rehabilitation, and I might mention individuals will work with a vocational rehabilitation counselor, also a service coordinator, a team of individuals that will assist in developing this vocational plan. And I always think about this as really being the one of the most important parts. For some individuals coming to our door, they're very clear. They have a goal to be a teacher. They have a goal to be a therapist. They have a goal to become an electrician. They come with a very specific goal. They've thought about it. Perhaps they've had employment experience in that arena previously. So they're very clear. They know. Often working with students or working with young adults, maybe this planning process takes a little bit longer. Maybe some of those services that Elizabeth was talking about earlier, this is where they might happen. Job shadowing, visiting work sites. The student is interested in construction, so perhaps having some paid work experience within the construction industry to determine if that's really the place that they want to be. I think back to a student not long ago in a rural and remote portion of the state who had grown up around horses her entire life. She had great interest in becoming a farrier. Um, the person who actually does the horseshoeing, which is such a specialized profession. And she thought that might be what she wanted to do because she had seen the farriers come to the ranch, seen their work, but she didn't know a whole lot about that career. What kind of training, what kind of skills does a person need to have? So in this area where we're talking about vocational planning, she was able to do some work site visits. She was able to shadow a farrier. She had the opportunity to conduct informational interviews, ask a lot of questions about what kinds of skills, education, experience would best suit a person to become a farrier. And so she came back to DUR and said, okay, I've done my homework. I really do want this as my career. I've learned that I have to be physically strong. I have to take coursework. And I also have to be a good business owner because I have to keep records of my appointments and my billing. So we were able to develop a vocational plan that was based upon her experience and the information she gathered, and also the kinds of services and resources that she would need to reach that vocational goal. So that's that first step, setting that vocational plan. So the next step if we were drawing a very straight timeline for Department of Rehab services, that next step is it could be the schooling, the training, assistance finding a job. It could be work experience, other skill development to be a successful employee or perhaps a successful business owner, and using that young woman as an example. So her next step in that vocational plan, her vocational timeline was taking the courses, which were, I believe, over almost a full year, but also she needed to gain work experience and actually go along with farriers cleaning tools, bringing the horses who were up next, helping to arrange appointments. So she was gaining some valuable experience while she was taking her coursework. So getting that experience and also getting that training. And moving along that timeline, once an individual's completed their training or other supportive services related to their vocational goal, of course, the ultimate goal is assisting the individual to get a job and to feel good about that job and to like that job, and most importantly, to be successful on that job. And when an individual has obtained that employment and they're doing well and they have no longer a need for additional DOR services, at that point, DOR would say goodbye to the individual, wish them well, and also welcome them back. If they have questions, they need assistance in the future, they're welcome to return and to see us again for some more support and services. Often we receive the question of, well, this very straight path, this arrow, how long does it take? And that really depends upon the individual. Every individual that is coming to DOR and found eligible and we're moving forward, their vocational plan is specific to them, very individualized. And so for one individual, they may be with us 18 months. Another individual may have a vocational goal that has a lot of education, a lot of work experience required. Maybe there's an internship or apprenticeship required. So that individual may be with us for 4 years or maybe even a little bit longer. But our whole desire is to help that person to continue to move forward, to continue to strive towards that employment goal. I'm going to pause right here. I see a lot of chat popping up. Let's see. Just looking to see if there were any specific questions about that timeline, Elizabeth, if there was anything that I left out, or if we are at the point where we have a few more minutes within our allotted time, if there are any questions or comments. And I do welcome you if you're not comfortable asking the question here today. Our email address, you can easily reach out to us at doroutreach@dor.ca.gov. I monitor that email box, so I'd be happy to have a conversation with you or answer any questions.
And Chris, looks like Protima has her hand up. So Protima, feel free to unmute.
Hi, Jackie. Thank you very much. Thank you for this helpful presentation. I was curious, does DOR help with records clearance or trying to obtain driver's license or certification that may be prerequisite for jobs that individuals are interested in? Thank you.
Thank you for asking that question, and I should have included that in my remarks. The short answer is absolutely yes, because when we're working with an individual, we have that vocational goal. That vocational plan is, dare I say, a long list of services, resources, supports that will assist that individual to reach that goal. And sometimes it is working on that clearance. So collaborating with those systems that can assist with that clearance. Definitely for individuals who driving is an essential function to get to and from work, or even an essential function of their vocational goal, their ultimate career goal. definitely including those sorts of services and support in the vocational plan. Get that driver's license or specialized driver's license for sure. Good question.
Thank
I
you
have
for your
another.
answer.
Thank you for that. Another question, Chris, is there's a question from the audience about what type of documentation is needed to give evidence of the disability?
Thank you for asking that question. So, a little bit of a longer answer. So, if the individual is a student, and that's perhaps a tad, dare I say, a smudge easier. So, if the student has an educational plan or a 504 plan, or is there documentation of depression or anxiety, or a hearing loss, or a weakness of a limb due to injury, accident, or a disease? If there is that documentation, that's very helpful for us to get started and keep moving forward. Now, if there is zero documentation about a hearing loss or a history of depression, we're going to ask questions. Tell us a little bit more. What does that depression look like? Are you not able to leave the house for days? Are you sleeping 20 hours a day? We're going to ask questions because we want to collect information of the person's story that helps us document with our professional judgment that there is a disability. Now, if there's documentation from a physician or from a physical therapist or an LCSW, that certainly a copy of that is also helpful.
Thank you for that, Chris. There's another question in the chat about individuals who need support with following up on the plan. What types of supports are available to help them navigate systems and follow up on individual plan items?
So I think what you're asking about is what kinds of support is available to help a person keep moving forward. Am I getting maybe reading between the lines? So if that's what you're asking, and that's the whole point of the importance of that relationship between the individual and the DUR counselor and the counseling team, is having that relationship, regular communication. If the individual is involved in coursework at the community college, regular touch base during that semester about how is it going? Could you benefit from some tutoring assistance, or are there other types of accommodations that will help you to be successful in school? So definitely that communication, and DUR is definitely reaching out to the individual, but we also want to hear, and we make it really clear to the individual that we want to hear from you regularly. Tell us how you're doing. If you're struggling, we want to know so that we can step in and be of assistance. So that support service can come from a variety of ways. It can come from our staff. Maybe it's a service that we're purchasing from one of our approved community-based organizations who we partner with in the community to provide support services, tutoring or job coaching, assistance in finding an internship or a mentor within the community. That support can come in a variety of ways.
Awesome. And feel free to follow up, Kelly, if you have any follow-ups to that, to your question. And Chris, I'm not seeing, and oh, she does have a follow-up. She's asking if there's an option for direct or warm handoffs to services. Thanks for that,
Please,
Kelly.
we absolutely welcome the partnership. And as Elizabeth briefly talked about, that the partnership, it really is a village, and we're really counting on that relationship, whether it's with probation, a community-based organization, a county health system. We want that partnership, and certainly, if you're working with an individual who would like to access DOR services, we welcome you to make that phone call, or to come to that intake appointment with the individual so that we're all on the same team. We all have that same goal, and we all want the individual to be successful in their employment and in their community.
Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you, Elizabeth. You are all still welcomed to continue dropping your questions in chat. We'll have another period of time at the end of the full presentation. So if you have a question that you didn't get a chance to ask, feel free to drop it in chat or also direct message me, and I'm happy to ask it on your behalf. But I think we are ready to transition to our next segment. Thank you so much, Chris and Elizabeth, for all of the information. We are going to transition back to Tommy. We are very excited to share with you some updates on some emerging work in partnership between DOR and OYCR. So I'll hand it over to Tommy.
Thank you, Tara. I really appreciate it. In this section, we're going to talk about the Youth Justice Action Web. In the Youth Justice Action webinar, I'll be discussing the Youth Employment Initiative. This is a program created through collaboration between the Office of Youth and Community Restoration and the Department of Rehabilitation. Initiative is designed to support youth with disabilities in their journey toward meaningful employment and career development opportunities that are involved in the justice system. We can move on to the vision. So at OYCR, everything we do is grounded within our vision and mission, and it drives our work. And we envision a healthy California that enables all youth to be responsible, thriving, engaged members of their community, promote trauma responsive and culturally informed services for youth involved in the juvenile justice system, and support the youth's successful transition into adulthood. So thank you all for joining us today. I think we can move to the next slide, Tara. So OYCR received a $10 million annually for 3 years under an interagency agreement with Department of Rehabilitation. Thank you, Tara. These funds derived from federal Title IV funding sources. And they require no local match, like many federal grants do, making them accessible for counties with limited budgets. The primary goal is to serve youth with disabilities in both secure settings and community environments, prioritizing those youth in secure youth treatment facilities, otherwise known as SYTFs, and less restrictive programs, also known as LRPs. However, the initiative is also open to serving youth under probation supervision in community settings. In December of 2023, OYCR announced this funding opportunity to California's chief probation officers and California Probation Officers Association. At that time, 10 counties expressed interest. That was including Lake, Imperial, Contra Costa, San Benito, Kern, Solano, Riverside, San Mateo, and Santa Clara counties. Additionally, OYCR solicited letters of interest, for master service contractors. This role from various community-based organizations and other entities. 8 of the 10 counties decided to join the initiative, and currently there are these 8 that I'm going to list: Imperial, Contra Costa, San Benito, Kern, Solano, Riverside, Sacramento, and San Mateo counties make up the counties in the initiative. Moving forward to the next slide. Following a rigorous review process, the Amity Foundation was selected as our master service contractor in February of 2024. Amity's responsibilities include program design, coordination with counties, implementation of workforce services, many of those services that Elizabeth and Chris spoke to earlier, And since their selection, Amity has worked closely with OYCR and DOR to develop evaluation metrics, create contracts, and prepare for service implementation. Technical assistance is a cornerstone of this initiative. OYCR and DOR, along with Amity Foundation, are actively engaging counties through meetings to provide guidance on workforce development and eligibility criteria. Amity Foundation has been conducting in-person meetings to assess existing programs that already exist in counties, identify gaps, and map resources within each county. The collaborative approach ensures that program address specific needs, maximizes impact, and builds capacity among local service providers. On the next slide, you'll see I want to talk about the success of the Youth Employment Initiative. It is based on OYCR's and DOR's ability to adapt to the unique circumstances of each county. OYCR recognizes that youth have better outcomes when they are in their own communities. Each community is unique and has different needs and approaches to serving youth. This approach ensures effective service delivery, excuse me, that was a mouthful, fosters collaboration, and supports long-term program sustainability. From the outset, OYCR and DOR have emphasized the importance of meeting counties where they are at in their development. Between May and August of 2024, Amity Foundation, Department of Rehabilitation, and OYCR held over 30 meetings with 8 participating counties to understand their current workforce development programs. We identified gaps, we established connections with local providers, and each meeting was designed to foster trust, gather insights, and lay the groundwork for tailored program implementation. Amity, DOR, and OYCR continue to meet with counties monthly to uplift the work each county is involved in, and we are beginning to create a community of practice to help counties succeed and discuss lessons learned from counties that have either succeeded or not met the goals yet. So that community of practice is really something we're trying to pull together and help all 8 counties lead this initiative. OYCR, DOR, and Amity are prioritizing the tailored approach by 1, conducting landscape assessments to evaluate existing resources and framework. 2, collaborating with counties to identify specific challenges and opportunities for involvement. 3, designing requests for proposals that align with each county's population and needs. Then 4, mapping community resources to build a network of support and address service gaps. These efforts ensure that all stakeholders are aligned and committed to the initiative's objectives. The first round of requests for proposals were released in early January by Amity Foundation, and they were in Kern, Imperial, Riverside, and San Mateo counties. Those RFPs have currently closed last week, but a second round of RFPs are planned to be released in February this month in Contra Costa, Sacramento, San Benito, and Solano counties. Several counties have already demonstrated the effectiveness of this approach. For example, Kern County's probation department was able to leverage existing personnel to serve in the role as a workforce development navigator. This approach enabled them to move quickly and make referrals to Department of Rehabilitation for youth that are on probation. Kern is actively coordinating with the Kern County's Superintendent of Schools to identify eligible youth for the program by obtaining lists of those individuals with IEPs and 504 plans. They are gathering referral, application, and consent forms while collecting essential documentation such as birth certificates, social security cards, and California IDs for the Department of Rehabilitation and Enrollment. As of December, Kern has currently made 16 referrals of youth that are on probation. San Mateo County has taken a different approach. They've embedded their workforce development navigator in their county office of education. The workforce development navigator there has expanded referrals and is including those youth incarcerated at Hillcrest, youth on probation supervision, and justice involved youth referred by other agencies. Currently, 16 youth have been referred out of San Mateo County so far. And San Mateo has also engaged with the CBO Fly to discuss the services available through the grant and encourage youth referrals. Looking ahead, Amity will continue to work closely with counties to finalize program design, hire workforce development navigators, and launch services by mid-2025 in all counties. By prioritizing collaboration and adaptability, OYCR and Department of Rehabilitation aim to create a sustainable model for supporting youth with disabilities in their transition to meaningful employment. And at this time, I would like to open up to any questions the audience may have about this initiative. You'll be able to ask questions at the end as well. Oh, I saw a question pop up, and there is no dumb question. I'll respond to that. We see more denser populated counties wanting to participate. We certainly, when we open up the initiative to all the counties, we did want to see rural counties. San Benito is pretty rural county that is participating. I think, you know, in the future, there may be opportunities for to form a collaborative of counties as like a region-based uh, collaboration between different counties to participate in maybe a future. At this time, that opportunity doesn't exist, but we can envision seeing something like that happen. Um, we certainly would love rural populations to participate. And also, like Elizabeth and Chris discussed, a county doesn't need to be part of this initiative. I think the unique thing about this initiative, we're embedding workforce development navigators within the probation system to identify youth that referrals can be made and do that kind of warm handoff between probation, county office heads, and Department of Rehabilitation. But certainly anyone in a lesser populated county can definitely reach out to the Department of Rehabilitation and either refer themselves or refer an individual, as Chris and Elizabeth explained. Seeing no more questions pop up in the chat, we'll definitely have time at the end of this webinar to answer more questions as they come up. But at this time, I want to pass it over to my esteemed colleague, Dr. Michael Massa, education expert for the Office of Youth and Community Restoration.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Tommy. Really excited to be here. In my previous work in school settings, DOR has always been an amazing partner. So I really appreciate this opportunity to try to connect how these two worlds can come together. I think all of us here have a vested interest in juvenile justice and have some familiarity around it. And I know what really started me in this work was, ironically, as a teacher for the students in special education classes, it became really clear to me as a high school teacher how many of my kids were involved in the juvenile justice system. And I couldn't believe it. This was in Los Angeles, huge school district. And I just couldn't understand because all of my training really reinforced that students with IEPs are the most protected students in the country, right? This federal law, IDEA, ensures that we're meeting to make sure that they're doing well. We put in these accommodations, these supports and services. Yet I saw this overrepresentation where my students in particular were disproportionately represented in these juvenile justice settings, and I just wanted to better understand that and just figure out what was going on. And so a lot of my work really focused on, dismantling this school to prison pipeline, right? Like all the research that I did kept bringing me back to the school to prison pipeline. And I thought, yes, absolutely, we got to break it down. But now, as I've continued further in my career, I'm learning it's not just about breaking it down, but how do we reverse engineer the school to prison pipeline? And that's where I bring that perspective and vantage point to this conversation, because first and foremost, it cannot be done by any one entity, right? Working in silos isn't going to get this accomplished. And it's these partnerships that really are going to be the catalyst for how we start to break down some of these practices and how we can really work towards the equity we want for all of our kids. So for OYCR, that is primarily the focus of my work, educational health. And we know that there are predictors, and we know the risk factors that exist for students as young as kindergarten, where we see suspension rates, right? Like, how do you suspend kindergarten kids? Recommendations for expulsions in elementary school settings, just these concepts that just intuitively don't really connect. And then we inevitably come to discipline practices and looking at dropout rates. And we start to see these trends and figures where this prevalence becomes much greater in certain areas versus others. And then just dissecting that and better understanding these systems and why certain kids seem to be caught up in this juvenile justice system versus others. So I just want to level set there as I go through my presentation. And please ask questions in the chat. I'm trying to monitor both. So let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so we know that there's this California dashboard, which is how schools are evaluated in California. And that includes the juvenile court schools, which are the county office of education run schools within juvenile detention settings. And they're, subject to the same level of evaluation by the California dashboard. And for those who are not familiar, it's a color-coded system, red being the lowest performance, and then scaling up to orange, yellow in the middle, green, and then blue is the ultimate category that schools want to find themselves in. And what's really what strikes when we look at the dashboard is that for the most part, and you'll see that in the subsequent slides that come next, there is very little information. So what we do know about the graduation indicator is that 10 of the 36 juvenile court schools are in the red, 2 are in the yellow, but for the most part, there's no performance indicator for the majority of the schools. And it's hard to work towards improvement when we don't have the data really spelling out that story on how we need to start developing that action plan so we can be really targeted and calculated to make sure that our students are receiving the educational programming that they need to be successful and are able to culminate. And I do want to point out, and I say this as a previous principal in a juvenile court school, the California dashboard is really designed for traditional settings, schools in the community, and don't really take into the unique circumstances. For instance, the transiency rate that exists in juvenile court schools. Kids come and go. Sometimes, a young person will be brought in and released that same day, could come back a week later. It's just a constant moving target. So it's really hard to work towards some of these outcomes in this particular setting. And then if we go to the next slide, you'll see that special education, we cannot talk about juvenile justice without talking about special education. And we know that in our juvenile court schools, our young people are 3 times more likely to have a learning disability. And again, it goes back to that idea of students who have IEPs being the most protected, yet we see that there is this overrepresentation. And we understand, that these cognitive, behavioral, and personality impacts really do contribute because, for instance, there's a lot of research where if, there's a group of young people and the police encounter this group of young people, those who are able to kind of talk their way out of the situation kind of, are able to go on their way, where those students who may just not have that same capacity and might end up being the ones that have that much stronger encounter. And so, and I say this very much from a perspective where just because you may not be able to articulate yourself doesn't mean that it's necessarily a cognitive impact. It might just be a speech impact of sorts. And so I always try to protect, and I don't want to create a picture where somehow we're looking at students with IEPs as being less than, or we use words like deficits. I really want to uplift that these are amazing kids who have the same capacity as all others. And when we take the time to better understand who these kids are and the circumstances that may have contributed to their involvement in the juvenile justice system, we see a much different picture than a stereotype that often is not true. So back to school students with IEPs, what I try to offer in this presentation, and I hope it is made available to everyone, is what can we do about that, right? And, I know I presented to some judges that wanted to have had that same question, or just people in general who are interested in our kids. And it's just asking, what is the school doing to help support a young person who may not be adjusting well? And that's where this conversation about an IEP is so critical, because that's where a team comes together to really look at supports and services, a behavior plan if that's necessary, progress towards graduation. And we just saw on the previous slide how few of our students are making it to graduation. But very importantly are the transition plans that must be a part of an IEP for any young person who's 16 or older. And that's a huge portion of our young people in juvenile detention settings. These transition plans cover education, employment, and independent living. Three critical categories that we need to look at when we talk about transition out of the juvenile justice system, not only for academic and scholastic purposes. So again, it's another vehicle where we can really look at making sure that these fundamental elements are in place to make sure that our young people are getting the supports they need. And then, for everyone's awareness, there is something in the Federal Individuals with Disability Education Act, IDEA, that's called Child Find. The school has a responsibility to investigate if there's any suspicion of a disability or impact, so that we can ensure that our young people are getting the supports that they need to be successful. And that is an area that we can always utilize to help support schools in making sure that they're looking at our kids and their needs, this concept of Child Find. Next, please. So for our academic indicators, we'll see that for English, there are two major areas, and we have a state assessment in English language arts and mathematics. And in English language arts, we've seen that all of the juvenile court schools do not have a performance indicator, and that for math, it's only one school that has the performance indicator in the orange category, one above red. So we know there's a lot of room. And again, I don't want to paint this picture disparagingly of the juvenile court schools or the students who attend these schools, because this is a national trend where we know that in the United States during COVID and up until now, our academic progress has been in decline. And so I always want to contextualize that our students are part of this bigger group. They're not just this like micro group of students who are maladjusted or can't function. All they need are the proper supports and really adults that care about them. And the students, young people, will certainly respond. For the academic indicators, one of the biggest problems is this idea that 95% of students need to participate in these statewide testings, which can be really hard given the transiency of students coming and going, especially in the pre-adjudicated settings. And again, we're looking at just 2 areas that paint this really large picture, but we know our kids come with many different skill sets in many different areas, and narrowing it down to these 2 content areas doesn't always paint the picture of who our kids are. Next, please. So chronic absenteeism, and this is going to be a large focus for OYCR, and I'll explain. But on the California dashboard, while it does reflect that none of the schools have a performance indicator, it's a bit tricky because the California dashboard only calculates this metric for elementary and middle schools up until the 8th grade. So the high schools are not captured in the California dashboard. However, the California Department of Education does track attendance and attendance rates. And for those of you who are interested, it's in the DataQuest database where you can narrow it down to a specific school in a particular county, and then compare that to countywide data or statewide data if you were interested in. So legislation just passed in the previous legislative cycle that puts responsibility onto OYCR to identify any juvenile court school that has a chronic absentee rate of 15% or more. And then we will go in partnership to really look at what's going on, what are the contributing factors, and create a very methodical approach so that we can work towards an action plan to not only improve the attendance outcomes, but also with careful consideration for the sustainability so that those efforts then live on just beyond the response to the situation. And in the chat, it's asking for the bill number. It's AB 2176, Assembly Bill 2176. Thank you, Pratima. And so we're really excited. I've already started the awareness campaign. I've met with the County Office of Education superintendents just to let them know what's going on, how we're intending to work together. I've then been meeting with the Juvenile Court School Administrators Association. I met with their board this past Thursday, and I've met with the larger group on Friday, just really looking at the data, where we're at, what some of these preliminary efforts will be. And then in a couple of weeks, I'll be also presenting out to the probation chiefs, because remember, in these detention facilities, it's a partnership, right? We have the County Office of Education, but we also have the probation department, behavioral health or mental health, whatever entity is that's supporting that area. We have juvenile court school health services. So it's really about everyone coming together to really understand that education is a non-negotiable. Our kids, it just has to be understood that our kids go to school every day. Those same compulsory education laws that exist in the community also exist in our detention settings. And in many cases, the schools are the oasis for our kids to kind of separate themselves from the fact that they are in this detention facility, but they might be in this classroom with enrichment, with nurturing, with counselors that are there to help support, with school psychologists that can offer their expertise, teachers that care about, with the probation partnership, right? And there's nothing more fulfilling than when I see a probation officer sitting next to one of the students, helping them with a math assignment or helping them write out an essay of some sort. Just to see that camaraderie coming together to really support the kids, that's what we should be seeing when we think of juvenile justice. Next slide, please. School discipline, and this is a huge area, and unfortunately, this is one of those metrics that you would think students with IEPs are protected from, yet we know that the suspension rates in the juvenile court schools are almost 3 times higher than the statewide suspension rate. And I've gotten this often, like, how can you suspend a kid when they're in a detention setting? Like, where are they getting suspended to? Like, what does that look like? And often what happens is the classrooms are separate from the living units. So if there is an incident in a classroom, like there is in any other school, the teachers have discretion to recommend for suspension, where that young person would then be removed from the classroom setting, from the school setting, and then have to stay somewhere else in the facility. Now, I'll give you a real world example. When I was a principal, on any given day, I had 50% substitutes. And sometimes the conflict that would occur in the classroom was because of the lack of rapport between the substitute and the student. And so I felt it was unfair for that young person to be suspended the following day from a class where that teacher wouldn't even be necessarily assigned to. And so we had this practice with the administration that we would investigate the situation. And if we felt that the situation would not continue if there were someone else in the classroom with that student, we could use our administrative discretion not to suspend that student. And you'll see that this is a pervasive issue, right? 10 court schools have suspension rates that are 4 times higher than the statewide suspension rate. 8 schools had suspension rates that were double. And there was 3 court schools that had suspension rates that exceeded 50%. Half the kids or more were getting suspended in those particular schools. So this is a big problem, because if our detention facilities are rooted in rehabilitation and we really want to give the students and young people the tools that they need to be successful upon re-entry, we cannot deny them school and the power and tools that they get out of those classroom settings. And so that is going to be an element that is reviewed when we're looking at why young people are not in school, and it might open the door to really looking at the behavior management program in the particular facility to really examine how can we improve that relationship between young people and adults with, again, that common understanding that we're all here to work together to support improved outcomes for our young people. Next slide, please. So behavior management system is what I just alluded to. And in education, we have something that's often referred to as the multi-tiered system of supports, meaning that in those green areas, about 80 to 90% of the students will positively comply with those tier 1 universal expectations, right? For about 5 to 10% of the kids, they might need additional support, some small group reinforcement. And then in the single 1 to 5% of the students may need that individual care. This same mathematical breakdown exists in the juvenile court schools. These are just statistical properties that really demonstrate that these principles also exist. People tend to think, juvenile detention facility, you might be all tier 3. That's not the case, right? We know that most of the kids, especially in pre-adjudicated, where they may not have done anything wrong, but be in the wrong place at the wrong time, are there to participate in meaningful ways and really just run a program as successfully as possible to get out as quickly as possible. And we see them in that green space. Those other youth in the tier 2 and tier 3, that's where we're looking at the additional supports, partnerships, and even contributions from community-based organizations that really help us extend learning beyond those classroom settings. So for behavior management programs, we really want to be rooted in that what we're trying to do is help young people get to the desired behaviors. Being punitive, it's hard to go that route in a juvenile justice setting, because how much more severe can that punishment be than the reduction of freedom, right? And when we're looking at consequences, it's not just to get someone in trouble, but it's a learning opportunity to really help guide towards a different decision-making process and really correct some of the anger management tendencies that we might see, or the outbursts that are sometimes just misunderstood and not really a personal affront or attack in any way. How are we as the adults communicating expectations and making sure that what we expect is universally understood? And then, of course, with rewards, how can we be fair and consistent so that those young people who are really working hard to be in compliance with these expectations are getting that recognition? So I always again try to offer some information in these slides that we can do as the practitioners, as the vested folks who are really trying to support our kids. And these are just some of the guiding questions. Were the behavior expectations communicated? Are there alternatives to suspensions, and what do they look like? The multidisciplinary teams, otherwise known as the MDTs, how often are those happening, and what are those purposes? What are they grounded in? Individualized rehabilitation plans. We know that all young people in detention are supposed to have one, but then on top of that, as mentioned previously throughout the presentations, is there an IEP, and how does that also braid with the IRP, with the individualized rehabilitation plans? Do the IEPs have a behavior plan? Is that appropriate? Has the youth been given an opportunity to communicate their needs or concerns, right? We often don't listen to the young people when they're trying to describe what is not working well. Is there at least one person in the facility that this young person has a meaningful connection with? Does the youth feel safe, right? When we behave in survival mode, it may not be in accordance with what's being expected. And what does the opportunity to de-escalate look like? Sometimes we just need to let people have some space to get those trapped emotions, the trauma that is often rekindled in these types of experiences. How do we let that come out? So again, just things to consider and think about. Next, please. So what we've done is in OYCR, we have our divisions, one being the health policy division. And we've worked to really map out all of the services that are available while in detention in the blue, and then how that transfers and what that looks like when young people are reintegrating back into the community in the green. And we really wanted to just map this out so we can reflect the continuity that does exist when we're making sure to put all the pieces together. So I wanted to make sure that this was in here again as a resource. Next, please. So the workforce development, I know Tommy just described this really exciting partnership with DOR and how we're making this just really substantially available for our young people. And, it's interesting because we always think about our young people, sometimes when we're talking about young people in the juvenile justice system, where, oh, they don't want to go to college, and we think of workforce just, in traditional assumptions. Yet we know that our young people do want to go to college and do want that higher educational opportunity for certification and licensure. And unfortunately, we do see that the unemployment rates for our kids in the juvenile justice system is about 60% compared to those rates for other youth that are not involved in the juvenile justice system. And what can we do about that? And that's where I think this DOR partnership is so incredibly important, because now young people are walking away from an otherwise harrowing experience with a new skill set and opportunity to really get back on track towards being equipped, better equipped with the tools necessary for success. And to use that time while in detention so that you can take community college classes, learn a trade that you can then transfer back into the community. It just creates this mindset where the time wasn't necessarily wasted, but instead you now have those tools to be successful for the next phase. Next, please. So higher education, and I will always be a teacher at heart whenever I speak to juvenile justice, and I will argue that there's nothing as successful as education in reducing recidivism and creating healthy opportunities. And we hear it from the young people, right? 2/3 of our youth in custody do want to go to college. However, only 10% of the juvenile detention facilities across the country offer these opportunities. Fortunately, in California, we have the Rising Scholars Network, which was a commitment of $15 million over 5 years and ongoing. It doesn't sunset there, for 45 community colleges to partner with their local juvenile detention facilities to provide college classes. And some counties have even gone so far as to work with the juvenile courts to allow furloughs for young people to actually go on campus. I don't know if there's anyone in the audience from Kern, but I was at Bakersfield College for a presentation where some of the students with lived experience were just talking about their journey and how they ended up in pursuing higher education. And there were young people from the Kern County SYTF in attendance. The dean of the school was able to work it out where they were able to wear regular clothing. Probation wore regular clothing. There were no indicators that these were young people involved in juvenile justice. They were just young people on a college campus engaging in healthy higher education activities. And it was awesome. And the kids were so able to just fit in, ask relevant questions, share their stories. And I think when we see that success come from our young people, it just brings it back to why we do the work that we do, because I don't think there's anything as rewarding as that. We know that through Rising Scholars, there are professors that are coming into the facilities. Probation departments are working with the county offices to figure out how to make sure the technology is in place. It's really forcing the juvenile justice community to come together to really make this opportunity as substantial as possible. And by no means am I going to sit here and say that it's all perfect. We always have room to grow, but at least the door is now open in a substantial way for our young people to continue their education beyond high school and really look at higher education as a viable opportunity. Next, please. So literacy development, this is a priority for the state. We know we have the California Comprehensive State Literacy Plan. Fortunately, we've been able to partner with a nonprofit organization, Collaborative Classroom, and create a literacy intervention specifically designed for a juvenile court school setting. And we were able to partner with our amazing colleagues in San Diego County Office of Education. And we ran a 30-day literacy intervention pilot where over 100 kids were screened in that time frame. Of the young people that were eligible, who were found to have literacy rates between kindergarten and 3rd grade, because all the programs for high schoolers start at about the 4th grade level. So we knew there was a segment that was not being supported properly. And we found that it was up to 25% of the young people who fell between that kindergarten and third grade literacy level. And I say this with the caveat that it's not the young people's faults. When we looked further, we saw that these were young people who were in essence failed by systems and structures that should have caught them much earlier. But we work with what we have, and we were able to design this intervention in collaboration with probation and the behavioral health folks. And so we started to really make a difference because we pulled the students out one at a time and really gave them a thorough assessment. We were able to really pick up where they were able to participate. And what became an unintended, I won't say consequence because it went better than we could have thought of. We created these certificates that the young people could bring to court with them to demonstrate how well they're doing while they're in this unfortunate situation. And now we saw that the kids who were not in the literacy intervention, they wanted to now participate because they wanted a certificate to bring to court. So it was just really cool to see how we can socially construct a reality where even young people who didn't need literacy intervention were really motivated to try to access that so that they can go to court in as positive a standing as possible. So just really quick, so the statistics were about a quarter of the students were within that K-3 literacy rate. Of those students, 90% plus had IEPs, and about 50% were English learners. So this was now going to also help satisfy some of the compliance around special education and help satisfy the designated instruction for our English learners. Next slide, please. So we know that one of the areas that we can certainly improve upon is to just really communicate to our young people what their options are, what resources are available, how they can map out their time in detention in a way that really takes advantage of what's available, which will completely transform the experience of reentry. And so we've created a brochure. We're still working on some of the fine tuning, but we really wanted to make something tangible that could be given to a young person right upon enrollment so that they saw what was available, how they can access the resources, and how those resources can help. And then in our next slide, all of this these were my students, so I love to show them off. And we were able to get kids, to graduate while in detention, pre-adjudicated settings. And I would keep the robe and graduation hat in my office, and I worked it out with probation because kids might satisfy their graduation requirements on any random day. And so as soon as their transcript reflected that they are now have met the criteria for graduation, I would make a big deal, bring the robe and hat. They were able to walk back to their living units, feeling good about themselves. And I really wanted to do this so that other students could then become motivated so that they would say, hey, Masa, when do I get to put mine on? And it just changes the dynamic of the conversation and gives some goals to work towards. And more than anything, I wanted them to see each other be successful and not just live in this mindset that everyone was there for something bad. It is possible to make those changes. It's in our mission and vision. And these are the steps we really wanted to take to make sure that our kids can see their potential despite the setbacks that they might be encountering, that it's still possible. And with our support, it's a hope that can still continue to live. So thank you very much, everyone. I know this was a little bit off of the DOR, but it just goes to show how we all need to work together so that we really are maximizing the resources that each of us have individually, but how much more powerful it is as a collective. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Masa. And at this point, we would welcome you to continue dropping Any additional questions that you have for Dr. Massa or any of our speakers? If you thought of anything else that you didn't get an opportunity to ask, this is a great time to do it. We'll pause just for a moment just to make sure we're not missing any questions. Thank you for all the feedback in the chat. All right,
Thank
well,
you. You guys are great.
we will roll on to our closing steps. We have a few things for you in closing today. First and foremost, please do join me in thanking all 4 of our speakers for today for being so generous, each of you with your time and for sharing such insightful ideas to drive all of our work. Thank you to all of you participants for joining today. And after today's webinar, we encourage you each to take a moment to reflect on what you want to explore further, what additional information you might seek out, and what next steps feel the most relevant for you. Just a reminder that this webinar recording will be available on the OYCR website by the end of this week, and we will also be emailing it out directly to all of you who have joined us here today. That link, once it's posted, we will email that out to everyone. Most importantly, in closing, we welcome you to take the feedback survey. We really do use this feedback to drive the design of our webinar series. And so we invite you to either use the QR code if you'd like to use your mobile device, or in just a moment, you'll see a link in the chat if you'd like to click on that using the device that you're joining on. It takes less than, it says 5 minutes, but it really takes 2 minutes or less. We welcome you to take that survey. Feel free to give us feedback on today's webinar. And if you have other topics that you're interested in that you'd like to see in the webinar series, please do drop those in the comments of the survey as well. And finally, we welcome you to save the date for the next webinar in our Youth Justice Action series, which is coming up on Tuesday, March 18th at noon. And just a scheduling note here, beginning next month in March, what the webinars for this series will shift to the 3rd Tuesday of each month, and we will transition to a 1-hour format, hoping that we can ensure that this format is accessible to you all during the lunch hour, and that we'll have you all to be able to join us on a consistent basis. We welcome you to use the link in the chat to register for the March or any of the subsequent webinars using that same link. And we welcome you to join us for next month's session or any others throughout the remainder of this year. This concludes today's webinar. Thank you again, all of you, for joining us and for your engagement. We hope to see you next month. Have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.